Cain is sweating bullets. He can't wrap his head around the fact that this kid is actually challenging him with bare hands. Ghislain isn't bluffing. He rolls up his sleeves, making it clear he's ready to end this right now. He looks completely bored. To him, this isn't even a fight. It's more like a chore he has to finish. The crowd is going wild. They can't decide if the young lord is a genius or just has a death wish. The gambling organizer is stunned. He's never seen anyone throw away their only weapon in a life or death match. But then he gets a greedy smirk. If the kid wants to get himself killed, that's just more gold for his pockets. A man in the stand screams for blood, eager to see the arrogant brat get put in his place. The two face off in the center of the ring. Cain looks like a giant compared to the lean Ghislain. Ghislain doesn't flinch. He stared down monsters far scarier than this local bully in his past life. Cain isn't playing by the rules anymore. He reaches for his discarded blade, his pride completely gone. His hand wraps around the hilt. He's decided that even if it's a disgrace, he's going to kill this kid. He lunges forward, the sword clearing the floor in a desperate wide swing. The brute's eyes go bloodshot with rage. He's totally lost it, swinging with everything he's got. From the sidelines, Elena screams in terror while Belinda watches with a calm, analytical eye. The heavy steel blade comes crashing down, aimed straight for Ghislain's head. But the young lord doesn't even move. He's already predicted the path of the sword before the swing even started. He steps into the strike instead of trying to run away. He slips right past the edge, getting inside the big man's guard where the long sword is completely useless. His footwork is flawless, fast, light, and perfectly controlled. It's like he's a ghost. 1 second he's there, the next he's a blur moving behind the massive swing. Ghislain's fist connects with the brute's ribs with the sound of a heavy thud. His gaze remains icy. He's not just fighting. He's systematically breaking his opponent down. Before the giant can even react, a follow-up punch smashes right into his jaw. Blood splatters across the floor as the guy's head snaps back from the sheer force. Cain collapses to his knees, coughing up blood and gasping for air. He looks up in absolute shock. He can't understand how a failure like Ghislain can move with such precision. The entire arena goes dead silent. The supposed weakling is standing tall over the bleeding brute. Ghislain looks down at him with nothing but cold, pure contempt. Cain's face is a total mess of bruises and blood, his ego shattered along with his jaw. Driven by pure desperation, the giant tries one last, clumsy swing with his sword. It's a pathetic attempt. Ghislain just leans back, letting the blade whistle harmlessly past his chest. He grabs the guy's arm, pinning him in place so he can't stumble away. He isn't finished with this lesson just yet. A massive blow to the gut sends the giant doubled over, all the air escaping his lungs in a wheeze. His teeth rattle in his skull. The difference in their real combat experience is terrifying. Ghislain unleashes a brutal barrage of strikes, hitting every vital point on the giant's body. Finally, Cain is left face down in the dirt, struggling just to stay conscious. Ghislain reaches down and grabs a handful of the man's hair, forcing him to face his conqueror. He leans in close, probably saying something that the big man will remember for the rest of his life. He stands over his defeated prey, letting the entire crowd see who the real master of the ring is. His expression is hauntingly calm. The mercenary king from his memories is finally starting to emerge. Cain's face is barely recognizable now. A swollen, bloody mess and a permanent reminder to never underestimate him again. A dark memory from his past life flickers in his mind. A few years ago, in a world that no longer exists. Back then, he was the mercenary king. A man whose hands were permanently stained with the blood of his enemies. He remembers this face. The man who led the Loges family, a rival who sought to profit from Perdium's decline. The man had that same look of arrogance that Cain wears today. A young boy's voice called out, begging his father not to go, sensing the impending doom. But the warning was ignored. The man chose his path, and it led straight to the mercenary king. Ghislain didn't believe in mercy back then. He can still see the man's final expression, a mask of blood and terror that haunted his dreams for years. He remembers the feeling of his knuckles hitting bone, over and over, until there was nothing left to strike. That version of Ghislain was a monster that only knew how to destroy everything in its path. But that life is over. He's not that monster anymore. Back in the present, Ghislain stands over the broken remains of Cain Loges, the same family he once eradicated. He looks down at his former tormentor, now reduced to a pathetic, bleeding heap on the arena floor. The silence in the arena is heavy as the crowd finally processes the fact that the trash lackey just demolished a champion. Cain can't even find the strength to look up. His pride, his reputation, and his future were all shattered in a single afternoon. The spectators are frozen in shock. Nobody expected the underdog to survive, let alone completely dominate the fight. The gambling organizer's face turns ashen. He's watching his entire profit for the month vanish in a single bet. While some are cursing their luck, the few who took a chance on the young lord are roaring in triumph. Elena is jumping for joy, her face beaming with pride for her brother. Belinda watches with a faint, satisfied smile. Ghislain doesn't care about the applause. He turns his cold gaze toward the man holding the purse strings. The organizer starts sweating profusely. He's looking at a payout that could ruin his business. He tries to stammer out an excuse, his eyes darting around for any loophole to avoid paying the massive debt. But Ghislain's intense glare cuts him off. It's the gaze of a man who stared down death and won. The organizer realizes he isn't dealing with a lucky brat, but a predator who's already won the game. Ghislain gives him a thin, dangerous smile. He's not interested in excuses. He's here to collect his prize. The man's heart sinks. He knows there's no talking his way out of this one without losing more than just money. Ghislain towers over the organizer, who has fallen to his knees in a desperate attempt to plead for mercy. He makes it crystal clear. The debt will be paid in full, right here and right now. The organizer's bravado is completely gone, replaced by a frantic, high-pitched desperation as he realizes the scale of his loss. Ghislain grabs him by the collar, bringing him close enough to smell the fear on his breath. He isn't asking for the money. He's informing the man of what's about to happen if he refuses. Terrified, the man can only nod and agree to every single one of Ghislain's demands. For a fleeting moment, Ghislain's aura shifts, radiating a killing intent that doesn't belong to a man his age. In the reflection of his own eyes, he sees the face of Amelia Rayfold, the woman who truly destroyed his family in his past life. With the winnings secured, Ghislain walks away from the blood-stained arena without a single backward glance. He returns to the Perdium mansion as the sun begins to set, casting long, dark shadows over the stone walls. Inside the quiet halls of his home, the adrenaline finally begins to fade, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. He knows this is only the beginning. The real war hasn't even started yet. He stares at the massive chest of gold that the organizer was forced to deliver. It's more wealth than most people see in a lifetime, the first major step in rebuilding his family's power. He runs his hands over the chest, feeling the weight of the future he's about to build. Elena and Belinda join him, watching their master with a mixture of awe and newfound respect for the man he's becoming. Ghislain's mind is racing. The gold is a start, but the real enemy is still out there, waiting in the shadows. Elena, oblivious to the heavy thoughts weighing on her brother, simply rejoices in their newfound wealth. She laughs and claps, the sound echoing through the room, a stark contrast to the grim reality Ghislain is preparing for. Belinda watches him from the corner, her sharp eyes picking up on the intensity beneath his calm exterior. The maid's expression remains inscrutable, her red eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight of the chamber. Ghislain turns his back to them, his gaze drifting toward the window as he contemplates his next move. He can't afford to be complacent. He knows the spider has already begun weaving her web. He sits back, his fingers tracing the rim of the heavy chest as he calculates how much power this gold can buy. Elena and Belinda look on, sensing a shift in the atmosphere that they can't quite explain. In his mind, one name stands out above all others, dripping with the venom of 1,000 betrayals. Amelia Rayfold, the Saint of the North, who hides a predatory nature behind a mask of virtue. To the world, she's a beacon of hope. In reality, she is the monster that devoured his family in his previous life. The memory of her betrayal is a scar that time will never heal, a constant reminder of his failure. She is the traitor who led the Perdium house to its bloody ruin. And by her side, her loyal hound Bernarf Savage, a man as cold and efficient as the steel he carries. Ghislain remembers the cruelty hidden behind their public personas all too well. He envisions the coming storm, the clash that is inevitable if he wants to change his fate. The Lord. Elena's voice pulls him back to the present, her face full of innocent concern. He looks at her, his expression softening for just a moment before the mask of the warrior returns. He knows he must leave. There's a role he needs to play if he's to get close enough to strike. He walks out, his mind already focused on the North Witch and her lair. Somewhere else, the woman herself is maintaining her carefully crafted image of benevolence. Amelia Rayfold, a woman who keeps a spider as a constant companion, its legs crawling across her skin like a living jewel. She kneels in the dirt, offering a pair of shoes to a ragged, half-starved orphan. The child looks up in awe, seeing not a human, but a goddess descended to earth. Amelia's profile is serene, her red eyes filled with a manufactured warmth that fools the world. She stands before her personal guard, a symbol of divine grace and military might combined. The villagers cheer as her soldiers distribute supplies, completely unaware of the price they will eventually pay for her mercy. She walks through the crowd barefoot, a humble act that only cements her status as a living saint. But behind closed doors, the saint demands a very different kind of devotion. Bernarf Savage, her bodyguard and most trusted executioner, is always close by. He is a man of high status and lethal skill, yet he bows before her like the lowest of servants. Amelia sits in her private garden, lazily stroking a fat white cat that purrs contentedly in her lap. Her touch is soft, but her eyes are as cold and unyielding as the northern ice. Bernarf watches her, his gaze filled with an obsession that borders on religious fervor. He doesn't just serve her. He worships her, even when she treats him with utter contempt. He kneels at her feet, a powerful warrior reduced to a submissive pet in her presence. The psychological hold she has over him is absolute, built on a foundation of pain and twisted desire. He reaches out, his hands trembling as he holds her foot in a gesture of complete surrender. He kisses the skin of his mistress, a man who has lost all sense of self-respect to her whims. The spider on her mouth remains still, a silent witness to the true nature of the woman the world calls a saint. "You must not be weak," she whispers, her voice a seductive poison that fuels his madness. The Rayfold mansion stands as a monument to wealth and power, its beautiful facade hiding a core of absolute corruption. Bernarf Savage stands nearby, his gaze fixed on his mistress with a devotion that has long since crossed into madness. Her personal guard stands in silent formation, their presence a constant reminder of the iron grip she maintains over the territory. Within her inner sanctum, Amelia continues to exert her dominance over the man who should be her equal. Their solitude is broken by a high-ranking servant, who approaches with trembling hands and news of an unexpected arrival. Bernarf moves to intercept, his movements predatory as he prepares to receive the visitor on behalf of his mistress. Amelia's expression remains unreadable, her thoughts as intricate and lethal as the web of the spider on her face. The servant is left shivering in his wake, the cold intensity of the household's masters enough to drain the warmth from his bones. Bernarf's eyes glow with a fierce, protective light. He will tolerate no threat to the woman he worships. The meeting is held in the main parlor, where the gold-leafed walls tell a silent story of ambition and blood. Ghislain Perdium waits, his relaxed posture a deliberate challenge to the formal and oppressive atmosphere of the room. He presents himself as the carefree young master of a dying house, a mask that hides the vengeful soul within. Amelia's cat senses the underlying danger, its fur bristling as it lets out a low, warning hiss at the intruder. They sit in silence for a long moment, two predators sizing each other up in a game where the loser forfeits everything. Ghislain's smile is razor-sharp, his ice-blue eyes never leaving hers as he prepares to make his opening move. With a casual flick of his wrist, he drops a rare white flower onto the table, a gift and a subtle sign of his reach. He leans back and picks up his teacup, the rising steam acting as a thin veil between their conflicting intentions. Amelia narrows her eyes, her gaze tracing the lines of his face as she tries to find a single crack in his composure. She suddenly stands, the motion sharp and decisive, a clear signal that the time for pleasantries has passed. She walks across the room, her long hair trailing behind her like a silk shroud as she weighs his presence. Ghislain doesn't flinch, his gaze following her with the detached interest of a hunter watching his prey. The true Amelia flashes for an instant in her red eyes, a glimpse of the monster hiding beneath the saintly mask. The tea in his cup swirls, a small vortex reflecting the chaos he has introduced into her carefully ordered world. She looks back at him over her shoulder, her hissing cat a perfect mirror of the venomous thoughts now brewing in her mind. Ghislain sits back, looking perfectly relaxed as he casually holds his teacup. Amelia stares at him in total disbelief, her red eyes wide with shock. He makes himself right at home on the sofa while she stands there fuming, clutching her cat. He just gives her a smug little smile and takes a sip. Her eyes narrow, and you can tell her patience is officially gone. Ghislain doesn't say a word, just watching to see how she'll react. Even her cat is losing its cool, letting out a sharp hiss. He doesn't even blink at the animal's outburst, keeping his focus on the woman in front of him. Amelia looks away, her face shadowed as she tries to figure out her next move. He keeps that grin on his face while she glares back with cold, piercing eyes. That's when the heavy doors to the room swing open. Bernard Savage steps inside, his presence immediately cooling the atmosphere. He stops and waits, ready to act the second Amelia gives him the word. Ghislain doesn't miss a beat, his eyes tracking the man's every move. He's well aware of who he's dealing with, a warrior with the power of a swordmaster. The whole room goes dead silent as the tension between the three of them spikes. But Ghislain just gestures with his hand, acting like this was all expected. Bernard wastes no time and lunges in with his rapier. Ghislain just sits there, looking entirely too bored for someone about to be skewered. He keeps a sharp eye on the incoming blade. The room is still just before the next strike. He's still lounging on the sofa, sensing a real threat from behind. Right on cue, a masked assassin drops from the shadows with the dagger drawn. Ghislain draws his sword and blocks the strike without even standing up. He rolls out of the way and delivers a solid kick to the guy's chest. The force of the blow sends the assassin flying back. He gets to his feet, tossing the furniture aside like it's nothing. Bernard and Amelia look on, realizing their little ambush just failed. Ghislain just flashes a confident smirk. Bernard steps forward, drawing his own rapier to finish what the assassin couldn't. The blades collide, and the air hums with the force of the impact. Ghislain braces himself as the knight's strength pushes him back. Bernard isn't holding anything back, his eyes fixed on Ghislain's throat. He follows up with a series of quick thrusts, but Ghislain's defense is ironclad. Mana flares around them as they trade blows in a blur of motion. Ghislain ducks a horizontal slash that would have taken his head off. He pushes back against the rapier, testing the knight's resolve. They circle each other, the tension in the room reaching a breaking point. Bernard is starting to look a bit stressed. This kid is no pushover. Ghislain stands his ground, radiating a calm but dangerous aura. Amelia watches from the side, clearly annoyed that her knight is taking so long. She's got that creepy spider crawling across her face again. Bernard refocuses, his pride on the line. The rapier gleams as he readies his next move. Blue mana surges through the blade as he prepares a high-speed lunge. Ghislain just smiles, welcoming the challenge. Bernard charges, his movement almost too fast to track. Ghislain holds his sword steady, waiting for the perfect moment. A storm of thrusts rains down on him like a blur. One of the strikes grazes his shoulder, drawing a thin line of blood. But he's smiling. His eyes are glowing with a strange light. Bernard thinks he's finally found a weakness. The frantic exchange continues across the hall. Amelia's patience is officially gone. Another heavy clash of steel rings out through the mansion. They lock blades again, neither side willing to give an inch. Bernard uses his weight to shove Ghislain back once more. He prepares to end it, his eyes wide with focus. But Ghislain is already moving to counter. Bernard lunges forward with a lightning-fast rapier thrust. Ghislain remains calm, his eyes tracking the blade's path perfectly. He deflects the attack with a slight, precise movement of his sword. The knight's blade misses its mark as Ghislain evades. Bernarf doesn't let up, pressing his advantage with more high-speed strikes. Close-up of the knight's intense, glowing eyes. Ghislain rolls away as Bernarf tries to pin him down. The knight grinds his teeth, frustrated by his opponent's slippery defense. He pulls back for another heavy attack. Ghislain manages to dodge a horizontal swing that nearly takes his head off. He leaps back to reset his footing. Ghislain takes a deep breath, preparing for the next phase of the fight. The two combatants face off across the ballroom floor. Bernarf adjusts his grip, refusing to let the boy escape. He tosses a broken piece of furniture aside to clear his path. Close-up of Bernarf's determined face. Ghislain looks back at him with a cold, analytical stare. They trade blows again in a flurry of sparks and steel. Bernarf's aura flares as he puts even more power into his rapier. Ghislain reaches out, and thin blue lines of mana stretch from his fingers. He whips the mana threads forward with a flick of his wrist. Bernarf is caught completely off guard by the unorthodox technique. The knight can't believe his eyes as he sees the threads. The mana threads lash out, striking Bernarf across the face. Ghislain follows up the opening with a powerful strike. He connects with a heavy kick that sends Bernarf stumbling back. The knight is left dazed and bleeding from the sudden counterattack. Amelia watches the scene unfold, her mouth hanging open in shock. Ghislain leaps into the air, bringing his sword down with crushing force. Bernarf raises his rapier to block, but the impact is devastating. The two blades lock together in a desperate struggle of strength. Ghislain's raw power begins to overwhelm the knight's defense. Bernarf is shoved back, his feet skidding across the floor. He realizes that he's lost the upper hand in this fight. Close-up of Bernarf's shocked expression. Ghislain's gaze is ice-cold as he looks down at his opponent. He doesn't show a hint of mercy. Seeing her knight failing, Amelia grabs her cat and makes a run for it. She's terrified, her usual composure completely shattered. She bolts down the hallway, desperate to get away from Ghislain. She looks back over her shoulder, teeth gritted in fear. Close-up of her panicked red eye as she flees. Amelia runs desperately through the corridor, clutching her white cat. She stops dead in her tracks as a hooded figure appears before her, standing amidst defeated guards. The figure stands tall, her cloak billowing in the cold air of the manor. The hood pulls back slightly, revealing Belinda's cold, pinkish-red eyes. Amelia's face pales with terror, the spider on her lip twitching as she realizes who it is. Belinda lets out a soft, mocking chuckle from beneath her hood. In a flash, Belinda is behind her, pressing a sharp dagger against Amelia's throat. Amelia can barely breathe, her eyes wide with the realization that her plan has failed. Belinda stares down at her with a gaze devoid of any warmth or mercy. Shadows of the past flicker through Amelia's mind, a childhood filled with nightmares and spiders. Belinda tightens her grip, ensuring her captive cannot escape. A small spider falls from Amelia's face, landing on the cold floor. A heavy boot crushes the insect into the ground. Back in the ballroom, Bernarf realizes his mistress has been captured and turns his focus back to Ghislain. Ghislain senses the shift in the atmosphere and narrows his eyes. Bernarf's blue aura flares intensely as he prepares for one final desperate charge. The knight stares down the young master, knowing his life and honor are on the line. He grits his teeth, his expression a mix of duty and raw aggression. Ghislain gives a short, confident huff, unfazed by the knight's growing pressure. The two warriors stand poised, the air between them crackling with killing intent. They collide in a shower of sparks, their blades moving faster than the eye can follow. Bernarf pours every ounce of his strength into a series of rapid-fire thrusts. Ghislain dances through the storm of steel, his movements fluid and precise. The tip of Bernarf's rapier whistles past Ghislain's neck as he narrowly evades. The young master's eyes glow with a sharp predatory light. Bernarf continues his assault, his rapier becoming a blur of silver light. Ghislain finds his opening and prepares to bring the duel to an end. Their swords lock once more, the sound of grinding metal echoing through the hall. Ghislain swings his blade in a powerful arc, forcing Bernarf to defend. The knight manages to parry, but the sheer force of the blow rattles his arms. They trade dozens of blows in the span of a single heartbeat. The speed of their exchange creates a whirlwind of mana and dust. Ghislain slides back, effortlessly avoiding a lethal thrust to his chest. His focus is absolute, his ice-blue eyes fixed on his opponent's every twitch. Bernarf's breathing becomes ragged as the exertion begins to take its toll. They clash in the center of the room, neither side willing to yield an inch. Blood splatters across Bernarf's face as he sustains a minor cut from a grazing blow. Ghislain's blade flashes again, drawing more blood from the veteran knight. The sound of steel on steel is deafening as they reach the peak of their combat. Bernarf hides his face behind his shoulder, struggling to maintain his guard. Ghislain presses the attack, his strikes becoming increasingly heavy and relentless. He leaps forward, his sword raised high for a crushing overhead strike. Bernarf's face is tight with focus, his eyes tracking every flicker of movement from Ghislain. Ghislain launches himself forward, his red cloak fluttering behind him like a banner of war. The young master's eyes burn with a cold light as he continues his relentless assault. Ghislain expertly manipulates the flow of battle, parrying and counterattacking with surgical precision. Bernarf struggles to keep up, his rapier barely managing to deflect the incoming strikes. Red mana begins to spiral around Ghislain as he prepares to unleash his hidden trump card. He readjusts his grip on his sword, the metal humming with the power of his surging mana. Standing tall amidst the swirling energy, Ghislain prepares to bring the duel to a crushing end. A bright core of red light glows in the center of his chest as he activates the forbidden third core. He strikes with the speed of a lightning bolt, his movement almost too fast to perceive. The knight and the mercenary clash midair, their blades locking in a desperate struggle for dominance. Ghislain's hands are steady on his hilt, channeling every drop of his power into the strike. Sparks fly in every direction as they exchange blows with lethal intent. The air itself seems to scream as the two powerful mana signatures collide repeatedly. The impact of their final clash creates a violent tremor that shakes the very foundation of the building. Bernarf is left gasping for air, his body battered and his pride wounded. Ghislain follows through with his attack, his blade cutting through the air like a guillotine. A command to stop rings out, the red letters pulsing with an undeniable authority. The sharp edge of Ghislain's sword comes to a rest right against the bridge of Bernarf's nose. The knight is forced to his knees in surrender, while Belinda holds a panicked Amelia nearby. Amelia grinds her teeth in fury, her red eyes filled with a desperate, trapped energy. Ghislain remains unmoved, his expression as hard as stone as he surveys the scene. Bernarf lets out a long, defeated breath, knowing that the fight has truly been lost. With the knight subdued and Amelia captured, the manor falls into a tense, heavy silence. Ghislain levels his blade right at Amelia's throat. She's completely cornered, and the look on her face says she knows she's finally pushed him too far. He looks down at her with a cold, experienced stare. Since she didn't want to play nice the first time, he decides the price for his silence has just doubled to 20,000 gold. Back at the Rayfold mansion, the drawing room is a total disaster zone, with guards scattered across the floor like broken toys. Shards of expensive porcelain fly everywhere as Amelia continues her destructive rampage. She stands amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily while Bernarf Savage waits silently behind her. Bernarf remains like a statue, watching the daughter of the house spiral further into her madness. Her eyes glow with a terrifying red light, fueled by nothing but pure, unadulterated rage. Bernarf keeps a neutral face, but he's clearly braced for whatever storm is about to break next. Amelia whirls around and lunges at him, her patience finally snapping after the humiliation she suffered. She grabs his collar and pulls him close, her glare sharp enough to draw blood. She lets go, her expression shifting from raw fury to a cold, calculated desperation. The veins on her face pop as she spits out a new order that's far more dangerous than anything before. Bernarf bows his head, accepting a task that likely means death for anyone in their way. A vision of an assassin flashes through his mind, a predator that strikes from the shadows without a sound. The shadow leaps through the air, blade ready to end a life in a single heartbeat. Bernarf's gaze sharpens as he considers the true weight of the mission he's just been handed. Amelia turns away, her mind already savoring the thought of the blood about to be spilled. The two of them are locked in a grim pact, both focused on a single shared target. Behind Bernarf, the phantom image of a predator looms over a squad of elite hooded killers. A hand slams a marker down on the map, pinpointing the exact spot where Gislin's journey is supposed to end. Amelia's face is cast in shadow, her mind entirely consumed by her desire for vengeance. Bernarf's eyes widen slightly, feeling the sudden pressure of the order he's just received. Out in the wilderness, the chosen ambush site sits in an eerie waiting silence. Bernarf looks ahead, his expression grim as he prepares to lead the hunt for the young noble. Amelia's eyes burn with a single promise. Gislin will pay dearly for every bit of humiliation. She looks up with a twisted sense of anticipation, finally feeling like the hunter again. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Gislin Perdium is busy checking his condition, pulling up his shirt to inspect the damage. He grits his teeth, feeling the immense strain of forcing his mana cores to open so early. Fergus is chatting away in the corner, totally oblivious to the internal battle his master is fighting. Gislin clenches his fist, trying to force his body to keep up with the scale of his ambitions. He stares out the window at the passing landscape, already mentally mapping out the rebuild of his territory. But memories of the old battlefields haunt him, a vision of fallen soldiers he never wants to see again. He shakes off the dark thoughts and pulls his coat back on, refocusing on the task at hand. He buttons up his shirt with steady hands, hiding the pain beneath a composed noble mask. His eyes are filled with a cold determination that hasn't wavered for a second since he regressed. Belinda watches him from across the seat, her quiet gaze missing absolutely nothing about his condition. The carriage continues its journey through the forest, carrying the trio toward an uncertain future. Belinda's expression remains unreadable, her focus entirely on the man sitting across from her. Gislin seems to relax for just a moment, but his body finally reaches its limit. Suddenly, a sharp pain shoots through his chest, and his vision starts to swim. He hunches over, coughing violently as Fergus jumps back in a state of pure alarm. He looks down at his palm and sees a fresh splatter of blood, the inevitable price of his recklessness. He's pale and trembling from the mana backlash, but Belinda just looks at him with a calm analytical interest. She reaches out with a specialized tool, ready to perform the delicate procedure needed to save his life. Gislin suddenly keels over, coughing up a mouthful of blood that stains his clothes. Fergus is caught completely off guard, his face twisting in panic. The young noble's eye is wide with shock as the backlash from his mana cores finally hits him full force. He tries to suppress the next wave of pain, his face turning pale as he grits his teeth. It's no use. Another violent spray of blood hits the floor of the carriage. He stares at his blood-soaked palm, the reality of his physical limits finally catching up to his ambition. Sweat beads on his forehead as he struggles to maintain consciousness amidst the internal chaos. Belinda sits perfectly still, a dark and mysterious aura swirling around her as she observes her master's collapse. In the midst of his pain, Gislin sees a vision of a chaotic battlefield, with Belinda standing at the center of it all. Outside, the carriage kicks up a cloud of dust as it speeds toward their destination. Belinda's expression remains unreadable, her gaze fixed on something only she can see. Gislin looks up at her, realizing that his mate is far more than just a servant sent by his mother. Fergus is sweating and shouting in concern, but Belinda just looks at him with a tired, slightly annoyed expression. The carriage windows frame the blurry landscape as they race against time and his failing health. Gislin forces himself to sit up, his eyes showing a sliver of the cold determination he's known for. Belinda suddenly breaks her serious mask with a comical, exhausted face, trying to lighten the mood in her own way. Her red eyes flash with a predatory sharpness that reminds him she isn't a normal human. Red sparks dance through the air, signaling the intensity of the mana procedure she just performed. They eventually arrive at a clearing, and Gislin steps out of the carriage, looking much more stable thanks to Belinda. Fergus looks around nervously, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his sword. The young noble's gaze is fixed on the path ahead, his mind already on the man he's come to recruit. Fergus is sweating buckets now, clearly unsettled by the creepy atmosphere of the forest of beasts. He keeps glancing back at the trees, expecting a monster to jump out at any second. They finally reach a small, dilapidated shack tucked away in the thickest part of the woods. Belinda stays a few steps behind, watching her master's back as he approaches the front door. She casually stretches her arms over her head, looking like she's just out for a morning stroll rather than a dangerous recruitment mission. Ghislain takes a deep breath, preparing himself for the confrontation that's about to happen. The carriage waits in the distance while the group stands in front of the rundown building. Without hesitation, Ghislain steps forward and delivers a firm knock on the weathered wooden door. From above, the group looks small against the backdrop of the untamed forest. The door creaks open just a crack, revealing a giant of a man with messy white hair and a look of pure hostility. This is Gillian, the legendary leader who has fallen from grace and now lives like a hermit. Fergus and the others stand back, feeling the massive pressure radiating from the old man. Belinda whispers something to Ghislain, probably a warning about the beast-like energy coming from Gillian. Gillian's single blue eye glares out from beneath his shaggy brow, judging the visitors. They face each other at the threshold, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. Despite the old man's intimidating size, Ghislain doesn't take a single step back. Gillian's eye glows with a faint, dangerous light as he realizes this isn't a normal noble brat. The old mercenary's face is a map of scars and years of brutal combat. Ghislain extends a hand in a gesture of peace, or perhaps a challenge. Fergus and the soldier watch from a safe distance, ready to jump in if things go south. In Gillian's mind, the sight of a soldier's gear brings back a flood of memories of his glory days. He sees a vision of his former unit, the Ratatosker, standing tall on a field of victory. Gillian's single eye goes wide as he recognizes something in the young man before him. Ghislain keeps his hand extended, his expression one of calm authority as he makes his proposal. Suddenly, a massive axe head spins through the air, narrowly missing the young noble. Ghislain doesn't even flinch, his gaze steady as the blade whizzes past. Fergus and the other soldiers tense up, but Belinda remains perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the giant old man. Gillian's hand clenches into a fist, his muscles bulging as he suppresses a surge of emotion. The tiny shack is crowded with the sudden influx of people, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Gillian bows his head, his shaggy white hair hiding his expression from the group. Belinda stands ready to strike if needed, but Ghislain signals for her to stand down. A faint, desperate sound escapes the giant's lips, shattering his tough exterior. The group watches in silence as the legendary Gillian seems to shrink before their eyes, burdened by a hidden grief. Ghislain looks on without pity, knowing that he needs the man's strength, not his sorrow. The reason for Gillian's despair is revealed. A young girl lying in the corner, her clothes soaked in blood from a violent cough. She gasps for air, her small body racked by a disease that magic seems unable to cure. Gillian rushes to her side, his massive frame trembling with a helplessness that contrasts sharply with his warrior's stature. He cradles the dying girl in his arms, his face a mask of agony as he listens to her ragged breathing. Ghislain steps forward, his eyes scanning the room for the ingredients he knows must be somewhere in this workshop. The giant sits slumped on the floor, his spirit broken by the slow, painful death of the only thing he has left. The shack is filled with the tools of both a blacksmith and a mercenary, but they are all covered in a thick layer of dust. The girl cries out in pain, her face smeared with blood as the illness takes another toll on her fragile strength. Ghislain begins to pull off his expensive overcoat, surprising everyone in the room. Belinda reaches out to stop him, her eyes wide with confusion at his sudden change in demeanor. He ignores her concern, his focus entirely on the task he's about to perform. The girl's legs are thin and stained with blood, a testament to the severity of the hemoptysis she's suffering from. As Ghislain rolls up his sleeves, Belinda gasps, realizing that her master actually intends to treat the girl himself. He gives a small, confident smirk, the look of a man who has seen and cured this exact condition in a past life. Belinda stares at him as if he's grown a second head, her red eyes reflecting her utter bewilderment. He hands her a scrap of paper, his voice low and commanding as he gives her orders. From above, the scene looks like a professional medical procedure about to begin in the middle of a forest shack. Belinda looks at the instructions, her brow furrowing as she tries to make sense of the complex alchemical formula. Ghislain reaches into a nearby sack, pulling out various dried herbs and roots with practiced ease. He begins to sort through them, his hands moving with the precision of a master apothecary. He carefully selects a specific set of leaves, checking their quality before adding them to his mix. He holds up a cluster of glowing purple flowers, the key ingredient for the life-saving tonic. With a sharp knife he finally chops the magical flora, releasing a faint, sweet aroma into the air. He pours a clear liquid into a glass jar, the mixture turning a vibrant shade of violet as the herbs dissolve. He shakes the jar vigorously, the purple potion glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The others watch in stunned silence as the young noble works with the focus of a man possessed. Gillian looks up, his eye catching the glow of the potion as Ghislain approaches them. "Give it to her to drink," Ghislain says, handing the small vial of glowing liquid to the shell-shocked father. Gillian doesn't hesitate, his hands surprisingly steady as he brings the vial to the girl's lips. He gently tilts the vial, letting the life-saving medicine flow down her throat as he prays for a miracle. The girl lies still, her face and clothes stained with the remnants of her violent coughing fits, as the purple medicine begins to take effect. The room is silent, everyone's breath held as they wait for any sign of life from the small blood-soaked figure. Belinda and Fergus watch with wide eyes, their expressions a mix of disbelief and hope at the young noble's sudden medical expertise. Gillian stares at the girl, his single eye trembling as he searches for any movement in her chest. Ghislain stands back, his expression unreadable as he watches the result of his improvised cure. The giant old man's face is a mask of shock, his rugged features illuminated by the dim light of the shack. In Ghislain's mind, he sees the image of a holy priest, a memory from his past life of the high-level magic needed to cure such a plague. Gillian's massive, calloused hands begin to shake uncontrollably as the girl finally takes a deep, clear breath. He drops to his knees before Ghislain, the legendary mercenary leader humbled by the salvation of the person he loves most. Ghislain looks down at the kneeling giant, his blue eyes cold and calculating, yet satisfied with the outcome. Gillian bows his head low, his shaggy white mane touching the floor in a gesture of absolute submission. The contrast between the two is staggering, a young, lithe noble standing over a mountain of a man broken by grief and reborn through hope. Gillian's face remains buried in the floorboards, his shoulders heaving with the weight of his gratitude. His hand grips the floor, his muscles tensing as he prepares to make a vow that will change the course of his life. He grits his teeth, his expression one of fierce determination as he looks up at his new benefactor. Ghislain offers his hand once more, not as a superior, but as the master of the legendary warrior he has just secured. Gillian looks at the extended hand, his one good eye reflecting a newfound purpose. Ghislain's eyes glow with a faint, mystical light, the mark of a regressor who knows exactly how valuable this alliance will be. With a swift, decisive motion, Gillian reaches up and cuts off his long braided white hair. The braid falls to the floor, a symbolic discarding of his past failures and his life as a hermit. The heavy braid hits the floorboards with a thud, marking the end of the legendary Gillian's exile. Ghislain turns to leave, his mission accomplished, with his loyal retinue following close behind him. Belinda, Fergus, and the other soldier are left in a state of utter shock, their minds reeling from what they've just witnessed. Gillian stands tall once more, his short hair and scarred face giving him the look of the terrifying charge captain he once was. Gillian looks like his old self is finally starting to wake up. He turns his back on his daughter's bed and walks toward his gear. He stops for a second, glancing back to confirm the deal one last time. Ghislain stands his ground, looking every bit like the commander he used to be. He gives a simple nod, and Gillian immediately reaches for a spear. His massive hand grips the shaft with enough force to crush stone. He swings the weapon, the chain rattling as it picks up terrifying speed. He launches it upward, and the spearhead smashes right through the ceiling. He plants his feet and yanks the chain back with everything he's got. His muscles ripple as he reels his target out of the rafters. The spearhead pierces through the wood, snagging something hidden in the shadows. A hooded assassin comes tumbling down through the hole Gillian just made. Gillian is already moving, catching the intruder by the throat before he can even land. The assassin's struggle is completely useless against that kind of grip. He keeps the guy pinned, his fingers digging in like a heavy-duty vice. Gillian holds the body up effortlessly while Ghislain watches the display. Ghislain doesn't even move his hand toward his sword hilt. The old man looks like a beast reborn, pure menace and power. He gives the intruder's neck one final crushing squeeze. He tosses the lifeless body aside like it's nothing but garbage. Ghislaine and Gillian face each other over the corpse of the assassin. Belinda is genuinely stunned by the raw speed she just witnessed. Gillian drops to one knee, pledging his absolute loyalty to his new lord. He looks up, eyes burning with a conviction he hasn't felt in decades. Ghislaine just smirks. His army just gained its first legendary captain. Vigo lunges with twin daggers, but Gillian stays firm behind his shield. The masked man keeps up the pressure, sparks flying with every strike against the heavy metal. A sudden shield bash from the old warrior sends his opponent skidding back. Vigo glares, his eyes burning with a desperate hunger for revenge. Gillian doesn't say a word, his expression as hard as stone as he watches the assassin. He catches the next blow and redirects it with a fluid spin of his axe. The massive axe finally comes out, cutting a lethal path through the air. Vigo barely ducks the blade, moving like a shadow across the dirt. He tries to break the guard with a heavy kick straight to the shield. It does nothing. Gillian doesn't budge an inch. Vigo hunches over, his mask hiding the strain of the losing battle. With the area cleared of distraction, Gillian tosses his shield aside to finish this. Vigo's eyes flare red as he prepares a mana-infused strike. He launches into the air, blades of energy extending from his daggers. Gillian spins his axe like a propeller, batting away the incoming projectiles. Daggers thud harmlessly into the ground, nowhere near their mark. Vigo drops down from above, aiming a killing blow at the old man's head. Gillian catches the strike on his guard, a heavy thud echoing through the clearing. They clash again, the speed of their movements blurring together in the night. Vigo has completely lost himself to rage, his mask barely containing his fury. Metal shrieks against metal in a desperate tug-of-war for dominance. Gillian finds the opening and plants a brutal kick into his opponent's chest. Vigo is sent flying back, his daggers burying themselves in the dirt. The weapons vibrate in the earth as the assassin struggles to his feet. He throws another flurry of daggers, a last-ditch effort to keep the warrior at bay. Gillian just raises an arm, letting his heavy armor soak up the impact. He shifts into a final stance, axe gripped tight in his massive hands. Vigo leaps one last time, trying to find some gap in the impenetrable defense. He pours every last drop of his mana into one final desperate thrust. His hand shakes with the effort as the dagger glows with an intense blue light. Gillian just catches the blade with his bare hand, stopping it cold with his own mana. Vigo stares in shock, realizing his ultimate attack didn't even draw blood. A single blinding flash of light marks the decisive end of the duel. A massive pillar of mana erupts into the sky as Gillian delivers the final blow. Vigo is left broken against a shattered tree, his strength completely spent. The old warrior walks away from the wreckage, his face showing no triumph. He pauses to pick up a discarded dagger, a grim memento of the comrade he just lost. His expression is somber, paying a silent tribute to a man he once knew. He looks down at the dying man, who's barely clinging to life. Vigo coughs up blood, the light in his eyes finally starting to fade. Gillian sits in front of a wall of weapons, a lone figure in the aftermath. A final look at Vigo's red eye before it goes dark forever. Gillian looks down at his former brother-in-arms, the duel finally over. Vigo is completely broken, his sword driven deep into the dirt. Gillian grabs him by the collar, forcing the assassin to face his end. He holds the warrior's blade aloft as a grim trophy of their final clash. The captain's gaze is hard, showing no room for mercy or hesitation. Vigo simply accepts it, his voice barely a whisper as he gives in to the inevitable. A hand reaches out for a final desperate gesture as the end draws near. The two former friends clash one last time in a blur of mana and metal. Vigo lets out a final blood-curdling scream behind his broken mask. Blades spark and energy flares as they trade their final blows in the darkness. Gillian moves with a fluid power that Vigo just can't match anymore. He sidesteps a desperate lunge with the ease of a master. The old man blocks a heavy strike, the force of it cracking the ground beneath them. He counters with a blow that shatters Vigo's remaining defenses. A heavy strike to the gut finally puts an end to the madness. Blood splatters across the mask as Vigo's breath hitches for the last time. Gillian follows through, making sure the job is finished. He stands over the body, axe held ready as the forest falls silent. The life drains out of the hooded man, staining the forest floor a deep red. Gillian watches him go, his eyes filled with a heavy, somber silence. The white beast mask lies shattered, a symbol of their broken past. A blood-soaked dagger is left behind in the dirt, a remnant of the struggle. Gillian retrieves the weapon, his hand dripping with red. He stands alone for a moment, the weight of the kill finally settling in. He hears footsteps behind him and glances over his shoulder. Ghislain and Belinda approach, having seen the entire confrontation. Gillian bows his head to the young lord, his loyalty now absolute. Ghislain looks on with a cool, detached expression. He's seen this all before. The cycle of betrayal and revenge that defines a mercenary's life. He walks past Gillian, focused only on the bigger picture. Gillian tosses the bloodied dagger aside. He takes a deep breath, letting the ghost of Ratatas go. Ghislain turns his attention back to the present. He looks out over the clearing, his mind already on the next phase of his plan. There's no time for sentimentality in his world. He suggests they loot the bodies for anything useful, much to Gillian's slight surprise. 2 days pass as they cross the landscape toward Perdium territory. Gillian handles the wagon while the others rest in the back. Ghislain sits in thought, watching the familiar hills go by. Their destination finally appears on the horizon, the family castle. Gillian looks weary, the toll of the journey and the duel showing on his face. Belinda rests her head on Ghislain's shoulder as they both drift off in the wagon. Gillian and Ghislain overlook the outskirts of the Perdium territory. A quiet village sits nestled in the valley, a stark contrast to the violence they've left behind. Gillian remains vigilant, his scarred eye scanning for any lingering threats in their own lands. The trio approaches the castle, the atmosphere growing more formal and heavy with every step. The massive stone walls of the Perdium stronghold rise up to meet them as they arrive. Ghislain prepares himself for the verbal sparring that often takes place within these ancient halls. They ride through the main gate, the sound of hooves echoing against the cold stone. Belinda watches her master closely, knowing the weight he carries as they return home. Ghislain's focus sharpens as he anticipates the inevitable meeting with his father. The castle towers stand tall and silent against the overcast sky, watching the travelers. Count Walter Perdium, Ghislain's father and the man whose approval he must earn, awaits. Ghislain sits across from him, the silence between them thick with a long and difficult history. Ghislain's expression is calm, his blue eyes reflecting a maturity far beyond his young years. Across from him stands Randolph, the knight captain of Perdium, looking predictably grim. Albert, the territory's treasurer, keeps a close eye on the proceedings with a sharp, judgmental gaze. Homern, the general administrator, sits nearby, his nervous demeanor clear for all to see. In the eyes of the world, he is just a young noble who has only held his title for a few months. But his spirit is that of the mercenary king, tempered by decades of blood and steel. "Father," Ghislain speaks, finally breaking the heavy quiet of the study. The count is a man of few words, preferring to let his imposing presence do the talking. The count regards his son with a look that is both searching and deeply dismissive. Ghislain meets that cold gaze head-on, refusing to be intimidated by his father's aura. An oppressive blue mana suddenly floods the room, a deliberate test of Ghislain's resolve. Zwalter takes a slow, measured sip of his tea, watching his son's every reaction. Ghislain doesn't move a muscle, his mental fortitude easily withstanding the pressure. The two men sit in a silence that speaks volumes about their complicated relationship. The advisors watch the standoff, their own anxieties reflected in their tense expressions. Albert looks particularly strained, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Ghislain waits patiently for his father to speak first, playing the game of authority perfectly. Homern's eyes dart between the two, clearly uncomfortable with the mounting tension. The council remains gathered around the table, a silent tableau of power and uncertainty. Ghislain's calm is unwavering, even as the count's mana continues to pulse through the room. Zwalter finally lowers his cup, his expression as unreadable and cold as ever. He brings up the matter of the mercenaries, his voice echoing with undeniable authority. Randolph's face contorts in anger at the mere mention of the outsiders. Ghislain listens carefully, knowing that any slip-up here could be disastrous for his plans. The Knight Captain and the Count share a silent, meaningful moment of understanding. Suddenly, Zwalter delivers his verdict with a simple phrase, "Great job." The Count's praise is unexpected, his eyes locking onto Ghislain's with newfound interest. For a brief moment, the walls between father and son seem to thin slightly. The advisors are left reeling, unable to hide their shock at the Count's rare approval. Randolph and Homern exchange a look of utter disbelief, their worldview shaken to its core. Zwalter erupts with a sudden, thunderous shout of approval, catching Ghislain off guard with the sheer volume of his voice. The council members remain in the study, the sudden shift in the Count's attitude leaving them in a state of confused silence. Surprised and wary, the advisors watch the exchange between father and son, realizing the political landscape of Perdium has shifted. Ghislain's eyes remain cold and calculating, his focus already shifting to the next critical phase of his restoration plan. Later, in the privacy of his chambers, Ghislain gathers his loyal inner circle, the steadfast Belinda and the mighty Gillian. Gillian stands silent and watchful, a massive presence that guarantees the young lord's safety within the castle walls. The old mercenary's mind drifts back to the darkness of the Beast Forest, where Red Eyes once watched from the shadows. Ghislain offers a faint, knowing smile, confident in the priceless information he has brought back from his previous life. Belinda shouts after them as Ghislain and Gillian prepare to depart, her concern for their safety getting the better of her. Ghislain glances back with a playful smirk, his light-hearted attitude belying the immense stakes of their secret mission. Belinda is left flustered and annoyed, watching the two men walk away with a determined, synchronized stride. The young lord's expression turns deadly serious, as he prepares to claim the treasure that will save his family from ruin. Hidden deep within the shadows of the earth, a dormant and world-changing power waits to be rediscovered. Ethereal blue crystals glow intensely in the dark cavern, pulsing with raw, unrefined mana. These are runestones, a legendary mineral so rare and powerful that mages would go to war for a single fragment. They are the essential component for every advanced magical tool, from arcane staves to complex barrier scrolls. Any high-level research involving mana requires these stones, making them the most valuable resource in existence. Ghislain recalls how Duke Delphine used this very discovery to build an unstoppable empire in the previous timeline. But in this life, the knowledge belongs to Ghislain alone, and he intends to use it to rewrite the fate of the North. He looks to Gillian, the veteran warrior whose loyalty is now the foundation of his ambitious strategy. Gillian listens intently, his brow furrowing as he realizes the sheer scale and danger of his new master's vision. He knows the treacherous nature of mercenaries, who would turn on their own employers the moment a job becomes too difficult. Ghislain remains resolute, his blue eyes gleaming with the absolute certainty of a man who has already seen the end. Ghislain and Gillian reach the mercenary camp, which is tucked away in a desolate, rocky valley. Inside, the camp is a mess of tents and rowdy mercenaries going about their business. From a distance, a scout watches their approach through a spyglass. He chuckles to his partner, joking that these poor souls have no clue what they're walking into. The scout keeps a steady eye on them, a smug grin plastered on his face. But his view is suddenly cut short as a massive hand reaches out to grab him. Down in the camp, the mercenaries are already brawling among themselves, completely ignoring the newcomers. That changes the moment Gillian walks in, his massive, imposing presence immediately drawing every eye. Before anyone can react, Gillian snatches one of the thugs right by the face. He swings his heavy axe, unleashing a shockwave that sends the surrounding mercenaries flying. The mercenaries can only stare in disbelief as their friends are tossed aside like ragdolls. Gillian stands tall in the middle of the chaos, looming over them with an aura of pure power. Heavy footsteps approach as the rest of the mercenaries fall back. The mercenary captain steps forward, dragging a lethal-looking flail on a chain. He stares down the intruders, his eyes narrowed and full of hostility. Ghislain remains on his horse, watching the confrontation with a bored, detached expression. He looks straight at the captain, clearly not intimidated by the man's size or weapon. The captain's crew gathers behind him, ready to tear these two apart. Gislin's icy blue eyes stay fixed on his target. The captain scowls, realizing these aren't just your typical travelers. He begins swinging his morning star, the heavy spiked ball gaining a deadly amount of momentum. A wicked smile crosses his face as he prepares to launch the attack. The spiked ball rockets through the air, aimed straight for Gislin. From Gislin's perspective, the heavy weapon is just inches away from impact. But Gillian moves like a blur, parrying the chain with a single precise strike. He grabs the chain mid-air, completely stopping the Morning Star's flight with his bare strength. The captain's jaw drops as he realizes his strongest attack was caught effortlessly. His weapon falls to the ground with a heavy thud, now nothing more than a piece of scrap. Gislin watches coldly, his silence more terrifying than any threat. A dark purple mana flares up around him as Gillian prepares to finish the job. Gillian deflects another frantic swing, closing the gap in a single step. He weaves through the captain's defenses, making the battle look like child's play. Gillian catches another blow on his shoulder, his eyes glowing with an intense blue light. He delivers a devastating counter, the sheer force of the impact shaking the entire area. The other mercenaries try to rush in, but Gillian sweeps them aside with his chain weapon. He blocks a sword strike with his gauntlet, the blade unable to even scratch him. With a final powerful lunge, Gillian continues his rampage through the camp. A huge explosion of dust and debris erupts as Gillian's power wreaks havoc on the camp. Gillian stares down the remaining fighters, his face a mask of cold fury. The mercenaries are frozen in place, their courage completely shattered by the old warrior's strength. Gislin finally dismounts and walks through the carnage, Gillian trailing closely behind. His gaze remains sharp and focused, ready to deal with whoever is left in charge. Kair stands tall, his muscular frame and spiky red hair making him look like a predator ready to strike. Behind him, his men stand in formation, their spears held high as they wait for their leader's command. Every step Gislin takes is watched by dozens of eyes, the air thick with the smell of dust and hostility. Kair looks down at them with a cold, jade-eyed stare, clearly unimpressed by the noble guests. The mercenaries of Cerberus surround Gislin and Gillian, closing off any easy path of escape. Kair remains silent for a moment, his face a mask of annoyance as he sizes up his competition. Gislin doesn't show a hint of fear, his expression as sharp and unwavering as a blade. A mocking smirk begins to form on Kair's lips, finding the whole situation rather amusing. They move to a tent to negotiate, where the three men sit around a rough wooden table scattered with scrolls. Kair leans back in his chair, making it clear that he thinks he holds all the cards in this deal. Gislin remains perfectly composed, his calm blue eyes seeing right through the mercenary's bluster. The guards in the background start whispering, their laughter echoing off the canvas walls of the tent. Kair lets out a short laugh, his gaze filled with pure arrogance as he looks at the young master. Gislin sits quietly, waiting for the laughter to die down before continuing his pitch. Kair eventually loses his composure and bursts into a full-blown mocking laugh, joined by his men. The entire tent is filled with the sound of mercenaries jeering at the crazy noble. Gislin finally speaks, his voice so cold it instantly kills the jovial atmosphere in the room. Kair stops laughing and gestures toward the door, telling them to leave before he loses his patience. Gillian stands ready, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his weapon as the guards close in. Kair's expression hardens as he catches the intense, murderous look in Gislin's eyes. Gislin leans forward slightly, a knowing smirk playing on his lips as he takes control of the room. One of the mercenaries steps back, unnerved by the sudden change in the young master's aura. Kair tries to reclaim his dominance by slamming his feet onto the table in a display of disrespect. Gislin doesn't even blink, his gaze remaining fixed on the mercenary leader with chilling intensity. He keeps his voice low and steady, refusing to be baited by the captain's crude behavior. The two of them stare each other down across the table, neither willing to be the first to look away. Gislin closes his eyes for a second, almost as if he's bored with the current state of affairs. When he opens them, his eyes burn with a fire that catches even Kair off guard. Even Gillian looks slightly surprised, sensing a side of his master he hasn't seen before. Kair's eyes widen in realization as the gravity of Gislin's challenge finally begins to sink in. Gislin leans in, his face shadowed as he proposes a traditional mercenary betting method. This is Moriana's recognition, a brutal ritual where two fighters are bound together for a duel to the death. The rules are simple. Two combatants have their wrists tied with a short rope, leaving them no room to retreat. They are forced into a violent struggle within a tiny circle, where only one can emerge as the victor. It's a savage tradition where, more often than not, both fighters end up bleeding out together. The rope is pulled tight, binding Gislin and Kair's wrists in a knot that only one will survive. Outside, a massive crowd of mercenaries gathers to watch the spectacle, their cheers and jeers filling the air. Gillian watches from the edge of the circle, his expression grim as he wonders if Gislin has finally gone too far. The two combatants face off, the tension between them reaching a breaking point as they wait for the signal to start. Kair lunges forward with a sudden burst of speed, aiming a heavy blow at the young master's head. He looks down at Gislin with a wicked, predatory grin, confident that his strength will end this quickly. But Gislin just stares back with a calm, practiced ease, as if he's done this 100 times before. Kair swings his massive arm, the rope between them snapping taut as he tries to overpower the younger man with raw, brutal force. Gislin looks down at him with a chillingly calm expression, his ice-blue eyes devoid of any fear as he reveals that this life-or-death ritual is one he has mastered long ago.